Welcome back, viewers, to another episode. I'm Sean Hanrahan, my good mate Andy Hilditch. This is presented by Platypus Brewing, all things rugby. We have a very special guest today, and I really think, Andy, you should introduce the gentleman. So I'll leave it over to you.
Thanks, mate. Yes, it's my dad. It's Stephen Hilditch, former international referee, as he will tell us about. He started refereeing in '84, but really was at the first 3 World Cups and culminated that big game when Jonah Lomo really steamrolled England.
I think Mark Catt's still halfway to China. Actually,
it's pretty good to hear the stories on it, but really good to hear the very first World Cup. Like, what was it really like? So it was really good. Hope you enjoy it. Here's Stephen Hilditch.
Well, next, this is another recording from Sean and I. And today, Sean, this is an easy one for me. I'm pleased to introduce you to my father, Stephen Hilditch, former international referee, who, in light of what we're talking about, a veteran of 3 World Cups.
Amazing.
Yeah. And actually, the great thing about talking to my dad is that he was at the very first one. So I think one of the things that we would struggle to remember, because we're still so young, is the
1987.
1987. So thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So, well, I think one of the things, are you looking forward to this year? What are your sort of thoughts about what's going to come up over the next few weeks?
Well, I'm going down to Dublin on Saturday to watch Ireland play England. Hopefully, Ireland beat England. I'll watch the Samoa match on the box because it's in France.
Yeah.
And I've just got an email from the IRFU to say that the past presidents have been invited to attend the quarter-final, which I thought was a bit presumptuous of the IRFU.
Yeah.
I then got a follow-up email which said, you can still travel to Paris, but if Ireland aren't in the quarter-final, we can't get you tickets. So at the moment, my wife and I are going to have a weekend in Paris come hell or high water for the quarter-final, and hopefully watch a rugby match at the same time.
Yeah, I think after the weekend, the unbelievable thing was Scotland's performance against France, where they just kept on knocking at the door. They're going to be yet another team in the division of death.
I'm particularly delighted they were knocking at each other.
Yeah,
that was the key point. I hope they've exhausted their expertise. We shall see.
We'll see. Well, listen, instead of us becoming me talking about how brilliant Ireland are, and before Sean gets all annoyed because Australia are, well, they're with Eddie Jones.
The most improved team at the World Cup.
They have a very low bar. So let's take us back to. We lost the sign. We're going to take you back, if you can, your memories to 1987. I think one of the key things for me is, as the first of its kind, and the inaugural and all that, what was it? We were still in the days of amateur rugby, but was the organisation amateurish, or was it a bit, we'll see how it goes, or did you immediately feel the Rugby World Cup was a significant step up from the likes of single events like the Six Nations?
First of all, Ireland didn't actually want to go to the World Cup. They weren't in favour of it. They had to be persuaded to attend. And the wonderful Sid Miller, was the manager, and he was terrific. Didn't start well. We arrived in Auckland, and on the very first day, our coach had a heart attack.
Oh God!
And ended up in Green Hospital in Auckland. Mick Doyle. The first match I was at the World Cup with David Burnett, who was, in my view, if not the best, certainly one of the 2 best referees in the world at that time. And I'll talk about that later, maybe. But the first match for Ireland was against Wales, and it was in Wellington, I think, Lancaster Park, and Ireland hadn't an anthem.
Yeah.
And they stood up, and the Welsh sang with their usual gusto the Welsh national anthem. Wonderful. And then there was a bit of silence as they stood there for a moment. And then a totally unknown piece of music played. And it turned out to be, believe it or not, The Rose of Tralee.
Oh, so
And
not
the
Irish
Irish-
at all.
Well, it hadn't been written at that stage.
All right, okay.
And I have to say that we looked at the Irish, Dave Burnett and I looked at each other, first of all, what the hell's that? And then the team looked at each other. And not only was it a poor choice of song, but the recording was dreadful. And it all ended, and there was a sort of sporadic clap compared with the roar that had greeted the Welsh one. After that, the only way we could go was further down, and Ireland lost to Wales,
Right.
quite convincingly. It was a poor World Cup for Ireland. In overall terms, it was a big learning experience, to be honest. Travel arrangements were unbelievable. I was based in New Zealand, and I was everywhere. Although my first match was an absolute ripper. It was Zimbabwe against Romania, for which I got a cap.
Yes.
We were given 4 free tickets for each match we were involved as officials. Right. And I thought, I can make my fortune here, sell these tickets. People almost got me arrested for obstructing them. They wouldn't take the tickets for nothing. There was no takers. And the only thing I remember at that game, that was the second time I'd refereed Romania. I did them against Scotland previous season. In fact, the match you were at were ill.
I was there.
Yeah.
Was ill.
And you were. And the Zimbabweans had a brilliant centre.
I know.
And he made a magnificent break through the centre, ran 40 yards, and dived onto the post, and in doing so dislocated his shoulder.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Do you know what his name was?
Richard somebody. Richard Simba, that's right.
Richard Simba, because it was a fantastic try. Right through the middle of the defence, and he scored the most dramatic sort of, but he led with one hand, went down and rolled. Shoulder out, gone. That was it.
That was out of the World Cup. Yeah. Well, I then was down in Dunedin. I'd always fancied refereeing at the Dunedin Stadium. It was a wonderful, evocative stadium. It turned out it was an awful place, really. And at least as many people were outside the stadium on the roadway where the pitch was entirely visible.
Wow,
so
right.
They stood on an elevated roadway and watched from there. And it was Scotland against Romania. And I'd become quite friendly with the Romanian captain, a guy called Parashev, very fine scrum half, a really good player. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to him, we've had your man in Poland overthrowing the USSR, and we've had Czechoslovakian revolts and so on. I said, when is it going to happen in Romania? And he said, next week.
This is Ceausescu.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was next week. And at least 2 of that team were shot.
Yeah.
It was a pretty awful situation. Wow. Anyway, Romania weren't a great team. They did their best. But Scotland had John Jeffrey, the now head of the IRB or whatever he is. And it was a funny thing happened. He went in a tackle, took a terrible, he went in, hit the hip bone, as often happens. And he was clearly not in good shape. He was white as a sheet. And the doctor came on, and the previous week I had touchdowns for Wales, and a guy called Webb, winger, had been concussed, and the international board insisted that he fly home immediately. Now, Scotland were due to play New Zealand in the quarter-final the following week. So when the doctor came on, I said, he's got to go off. He doesn't know where he is. And the doctor said, no, it's an ankle injury. I said, ankle injury? And so I said, well, fair enough. So he rubbed his ankle, and we restarted the game with a scrum. And I knew there was something wrong because John Jeffrey packed down on the Romanian scrum. So at the next breakdown, I called the doctor back on. I said, look, bugger the ankle, this boy, he doesn't know where he is. Oh, yeah, ankle, I'll take him off, he said. So I helped him. So doctor on one side and I'm on the other, and we took him over to the sideline. And the doctor said to him, do you want to watch the match from the sides? He said to Jeffrey, slowly, do you want to watch the match from the sides? And Jeffrey said, yeah. So they got him a chair, and you know what he did? He sat on a bench, actually, for the remainder of the match with his back to the pitch, looking into the stand. And he played the following week.
Yeah, times have changed now, haven't they?
Against New Zealand. Well, it was
dodgy.
Yeah.
Well, I also had the good fortune to be deselected at semi-final stage. It was 6 of us were stood down. I was clearly number 2 to Dave Burnett.
Yeah.
And I was at Concord Oval, despite having been stood down, because the rest of the referees said, whoever goes home, we're going to throw our daily allowance in the middle. We'll split it up amongst everybody.
Oh, right. So you did, in terms of the referees getting.
I stayed to the end. I stayed to the end, and I was the only one who did, because 2 other referees who were sent home were a certain Clive Norley,
right,
and a certain Quittenden.
Oh, Roger.
They didn't make it through to the semi-final stage.
Right.
But I went over to Australia. I had no matches. I just went over there and watched.
You weren't keen to get back to your children at any point there? No.
I wouldn't either.
In a word, no.
No.
You can say brilliant.
Thank you. It was actually a week of nurturing.
And I was there at the first final between New Zealand and France. Good game. And the whole thing was brilliant. The only disappointment from an Irish point of view was that I believe David Burnett had been actually given the final.
Yeah.
But what happened was that France beat Australia.
That's right.
In the semi-final. Brian Anderson refereed it. Just to show you how amateur it was. He brought a jersey which was the same color as the French jersey, which was not great for a referee.
Yeah.
And he borrowed Derek Bevan's red Welsh jersey. So he refereed the match in a Welsh jersey. It didn't go down well, Scott, I can tell you.
So you didn't have official jerseys, or?
No.
Wow.
And Bev, because he'd given up his shirt, just ran the touch in a track top and a track bottoms. And every time he put his flag up, there were about 8 inches of white Welsh flesh exposed. It was awful. Oh, dreadful.
Wow.
Anyway, but you see, France beat Australia, and everybody was.
That was the Blanco try in the corner.
Was right in my corner.
Yeah.
And everybody was certain. I mean, in fact, it had been selected that Burnett would do the final because Kerry Fitzgerald, who was the other challenger, was Australian, and of course Australia were going to qualify.
Yeah.
And then Australia were beaten, and the next thing they came out with this list that Kerry Fitzgerald would do not only the semi-final, which he did, but he'd do the final as well, and Burnett got nothing more. That was his last involvement in the World Cup, in fact, was refereeing that match between New Zealand and Scotland, which he did brilliantly.
Yeah.
But so it was a bit shambolic.
Mm-hmm.
It was very amateur in every sense. And they really got their act together then for the next World Cup. And the only problem with it was based in 6 different countries.
That's right, because it was the first time it held in the Northern Hemisphere.
5 different countries. I mean, my matches, I refereed in France, Béziers or somewhere. And it was between France and Canada. Hell of a game. Canada had a good team at that stage. Very good. And it was tight. France just squeezed through. And that was the match in which, again, with every respect to Australians, they beat Ireland in the quarter-final with a try in overtime, as they say.
I was there. I was there. I was in the crowd. Got up to 40 Hamilton and then followed by...
Unbelievable. Well, Doyle and I were in... It was I was with Owen Doyle. Old Doyle and I were in the changing rooms, prepared to go out for the quarter-final between New Zealand and Canada. And this boy opened the door and he said, "A minute to go, Ireland are winning." And Doyle and I are dancing around the bloody changing room. And then the door opens again. He says, "Ireland were beaten." It was awful, really. But anyway, it was better run, although the travelling was unbelievable. We were based in Cardiff, 8 weeks in Cardiff. Jesus, that's almost like a prison sentence. And we had to travel to our matches, to fly to France and fly back again.
Yeah.
Up Edinburgh and back again. And Doyle did a match in Leeds, believe it or not. Seals between 2 United States and somebody. And we got back to the hotel in Leeds, and there was a note that said, go to, the 2 of us, we had to go to Gloucester for a Sunday match, which was refereed by a little Argentinian, a good referee. And all it said was, "Make your way to Gloucester." There was nothing was arranged. So Doyle, being the man he is, said, "Bugger this," he says. "Trains on a Sunday in England." And he got a taxi. And we got a taxi from Leeds to Gloucester to touch judge that match. I'd never found out how much he paid. But he got it all back again.
I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did.
Those were the sort of arrangements which were made in those days. It was not as and then the third one was the best one. It was in South Africa, one country. Makes a lot of difference. And what did I do? In England, I refereed England against Italy, which was good. Italy were a right team. They had that wee Argentinian fly half who was a very good player. And England came through, and then I was selected for the semi-final. I did the match between England and New Zealand at Cape Town, which Lamu starred in.
Yeah, I mean, Sean's got some questions on that. I think we can ask him.
Yes, I mean, it's the wonderful incident that we know, or any rugby enthusiast in the world knows, where the late Jonah Lomu was, as wonderful as he was, made basically roadkill out of Mike Catt, and here you were refereeing that game, and we've all seen it on the screen. We've rewinded it, fast forwarded, had a good chuckle, commiserated with Mike Catt, and we thank our lucky stars that it wasn't us. I don't know how you would do it. From your perspective, Mr. Hilditch, talk us through and talk the audience through what was going through your mind when he basically stomped Mike Catt through to China.
The first thing that hit you, it was the size of him. You see, right at the outset, when he walked in, he was actually as big, as tall as any forward, and as heavy, if not heavier, than most. But he was wonderfully quick. That game, the out half, everybody had said to me that how cleverly I had avoided the kick, which was suddenly to the left, with everybody lining up on the right, the kickoff. And I just said, well, a bit of instinct there. But actually what happened was the out half said to me in the changing rooms before I went out, "I'm going to switch this and kick to the left, so stay out of the way." So it wasn't exactly skill on my part. But Longo actually took that kick. That was his first involvement. And they were obviously intent on feeding him the ball. It was just awesome, man. He was. The one thing you wouldn't have noticed really was that in all the clips of the wonderful tries, because New Zealand scored 6, but people forget that England actually scored 4 in the second half, 10 tries in a semi-final of the World Cup. Brilliant. I don't actually figure in many of them. I was a long way away. I have good eyesight. And actually, that's the last game that I refereed. And everybody said it was a wonderful game. It was fantastic to be involved in. And yeah, it was a good game, actually. And I modestly, I would say I thought I refereed it well. There was a reasonable amount of flow in the game as well, but there was a lot of good stuff. England were bemused by Lamu, did not know what to do with him. And they had that wee man, Underwood, the smaller Underwood, marking him. And at one stage, Lamu just picked him up off the ground and threw him, physically threw him into touch. I looked over and he looked at me and he just shook his head. What can I do with this, And I gave him a sweet shrug as if to say, well, yeah, that's your problem, son, not mine. But Lama was a phenomenon, without a doubt. He was wonderful player because he had pace. He had great step, great feet as well, good hands. I mean, he was the perfect footballer.
Yeah, because he scored a try. I think he scored a try from 8, the back of the scrum. His third try, I think. Yeah, he just picked up and went. But one of the questions I had for you was, which people sometimes remember, but it was also the game of Zinzan Brooks' drop goal from the halfway line.
That's right.
I mean, to rub England noses in it even further, that must have been incredible. How did you think he was going to do it?
Not initially. No, he picked the ball. I can't remember what the scrum was. Just inside the English half or on the halfway line. He was about 15 yards in, and he began to run. I was pretty well level with him, and he sort of steadied himself, and then he kicked the ball. And I thought it was a kick for touch or something. And I ran a few strides. And I said, "Shit, I think he drop kicked that." I wasn't actually sure. And then the next thing I thought was, "Oh Christ! Not only did you drop kick it, it's going over." And that puts a few wings under your feet, I can tell you at that point. I think I managed to get to about the 22 when the ball went over the crossbar. And I have a feeling one of the English players actually signalled it, which was just as well. But it was brilliant. And I was lucky enough to go back to the States 3 times to speak at a World Rugby conference. Now, with no disrespect to Americans, anything which is held there is called a world something, but it was attended by 98% Americans. It was great. We were up in, what do you call it, where the Winter Olympics were, near the North New York State, just short of the Canadian border. Brilliant place. And Zinni was one year. Zinni was one of the guest speakers, and we had 18 holes of golf together. And geez, he hits a golf ball like hits that kick. I can tell you, he's a terrific bloke. He played in England for a while at the end of his career. He's a really lovely fella, and I must say one of the things which impresses me about most rugby players is that they're good guys. They're really nice people. And they're not overly egotistical. They're pretty well, they've got their feet in the ground, but they're very good guys. Yeah. And he would be one of them. Excellent bloke.
And yeah, well, you're good. Well, no, I was just going to talk about, I mean, the refs now, I mean, they're professional, first and foremost. But I know that you were involved in a lot of the selecting, etc. But is it just kept on growing in terms of the professionalism of those guys, those referees, and are they all full time?
Yes. I don't know what to say. Aaron, my game in '95 was the penultimate amateur rugby match.
Oh wow! Right.
At that level. I often make a wee joke that my wife has always been critical of my timing to retire at that point. But since then, it has evolved and developed quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And one of the slight difference. I mean, I was involved in selecting referees at international level for 8 or 9 years, and traveled was brilliant, went all around the world to watch them. Great. One of the difficulties is that people try to remove the subjectivity from refereeing by making everything, like the TMOs you have now, and you have got the review of the red card, yellow card to red card. All those sorts of things are designed to remove subjectivity. But if you watch a rugby match honestly, and you look at the breakdown in particular, you could penalise every time, or you could penalise none. And what decides a good referee is actually his ability to judge whether it is necessary to instantly penalise, to wait for advantage, or, and this is quite important, to look at the materiality of the action. Has the action actually affected the play?
Yes.
And if it hasn't affected it, you deal with it in a different way. What you do is you say to the player, if you do that again, I'll penalise you.
Mm-hmm.
But you can let play run, and it's not advantage. What it is that you have adjudged the materiality of the action.
Yeah.
So those things are all very subjective. And to try and create a game like tennis, where it's either in or out, it's definitive.
Yeah.
And therefore the umpire can just say, it's out.
Yeah.
Give the score. Rugby football is not like that. It's probably one of, well, I suppose you could say Gaelic football is even worse, but there seems to be an attempt to, by replaying or by slow motion or by other people intervening, to take away the subjectivity of the referee. And I'm not sure it's working terribly well. I'd rather have a game where a referee's had about 4 errors and 2 of them were against each side, so that's fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things for a lot of our listeners in the US will be that's one of the things they struggle with. They deal with, I mean, as you know, I coach, and Sean helps me, and he played until last year, believe it or not. I'm not going to tell you how good he was or bad.
Or was it?
Yeah. He was present. I think that's how we described it. But the interesting thing for me is that if they need definitives in terms of how they played, how they're coached. So it is always been a difficult thing to have that subjective outlook, because we can have it because we've known rugby all our lives.
Comes with experience, yeah.
And with no experience, it is it's a difficult thing for Americans in terms of a new sport, because they want to know definitively, why did that happen? Because, as you rightly point out, Dad, if you do why did that happen, you could do with every action of every player in a situation like a ruck or a maul.
No, I mean, rugby is really a game of hopefully controlled chaos. And the answer is for the referee to try and create as much framework within which the players operate and are reasonably confident that they're not going to get away with it, but they can play on.
Right.
But that concerns me a little bit, because I'm not sure you'll ever get to a point where rugby, as it's currently played, can be made into a very definitive type of decision making.
Yeah,
and I think that there's a danger of going too far in that direction. But the other story which I'm going to tell you about is my encounters with England-France. I, for good or evil, I was given England-France to referee 3 times in 5 years. And the first one was at Twickenham, and the other 2 were in Paris. And the one which people remember was the second one, the one in Paris. It had come 2 months after I had touch judged England-France in the World Cup, where at the end of the match, as we walked off with the New Zealand referee and myself and another New Zealand touch judge, Dubrocca, the coach of France, ran across and shouted over and over again, effing cheat, effing cheat.
Wow.
And what he'd forgotten was that the referee was actually wearing a microphone in those days for the first time. And that microphone was connected not just to us, but to the journalists and the commentators.
Wow.
So everybody heard it. A week later, Monsieur Durbaca was sacked and Berbizier took over, I think it was. So it was a bit of ill feeling there because the French had booked their hotels and all in England to play in the semi-final, and they didn't make it. I hope that's not
The shame. Yeah.
Yeah. So I then was selected that was 2 months later, I was selected referee, England-France, France-England. And for the first time in the Six Nations, 2 players from the one team, France, were sent off.
Wow.
And the first one was Lascube, who stomped on the head of Bayfield. Not that it has helped Bayfield in any way, shape, or form. But the second one was Moscato, who took up professional boxing during his lengthy suspension. And he headbutted Jason Leonard.
No, Jeff Probin.
Jeff Probin, you're right, Probin. Anyway, the nice story is that at the discipline hearing, Lascube admitted what he'd done, and he was given 3 months suspension. They didn't piss around in those days.
3 months. Oh, wow.
3 months suspension. By the way, he made us come back in a game between the French Barbarians in Australia, refereed by me.
Yeah, that's right.
I said to him at the end of the match, "It's a pleasure to finish a match with you," but he didn't laugh at that really. Anyway, the other guy, Moscato headbutted Probin, and he was off. And at the disciplinary hearing, which was held immediately after the match in the stand at the Parc des Princes, it was. He had an interpreter because he didn't speak English, and the thing was chaired by a Welshman. There was an Englishman and a Frenchman in the trio, and they asked about, and I told them what happened, and I said I found I had no option. I'd warned him the first time, and we reset the scrum. He was away with the birds. So they heard the account, and the Englishman said just before we sentence Mr. Moscato, I actually call him Mr. Moscato, which is English, annoy the French that way. And he said, "Has Mr. Moscato been sent off before?" And the interpreter took the answer in French, and then he said, "Yes." He said, "Mr. Moscato has been sent off once before." Oh, could I ask why he was sent off? To which our conversation, and the interpreter said, Mr. Moscato was sent off for nervousness. And there was absolute silence at that point. And then he said, I'm terribly sorry to ask the question again, how could any player be sent off for nervousness? It's very simple, the boy said. Mr. Moscato was involved in a scuffle with another player. The referee got nervous and sent him off. So that's a fact. 3 months. Thank you.
Wow.
As I said, he took up professional boxing for a while, and he wasn't very successful at it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good story. So in terms of what you're looking forward, just before we wrap up, what are you looking forward to? I know Ireland, obviously that's key, but yeah. I think everybody was dealt a bit of a blow yesterday with Intimac being ruled out. A fine player and just brilliant to watch. But are there any other teams, players that you're looking forward to seeing?
I think that if Argentina can manage to put a finishing touch to some of their play, I think they're never mentioned in terms of getting anywhere. But their handling and their enthusiasm and their driving is terrific. But they end up pummeling away at a line and not getting over it.
Yeah.
But actually, they're playing some super rugby, and they're sort of a dark horse that you need to be careful about, whatever group they're in.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they're not in ours because they've dumped us out of the World Cup twice. Argentina. Who else? I don't know. I think the Blacks are coming back to something like their form, and they're not going to be easy. I think the sadness, and it's not just because I'm supporting Ireland, but it's ludicrous that the top 5 teams in the world are all on the one side of the draw.
Yeah.
So, one of them is not going to make the quarterfinals, and I just hope it's not Ireland.
Yeah.
But even if it is, to get to the semi-final, we are going to have to play Scotland, who are 5th, I think.
Yeah.
South Africa, and then either France or New Zealand.
Yeah.
Just to get to the semi-final. I mean, the whole thing, it's just farcical. And that's what happens when you create your draw 2 years before the tournament.
Yeah, 2 years, yeah.
And there's a dramatic turnaround in form. I mean, look, England were probably going in as number 2 seeds or something, and now they're lucky if they're in the top 10. Anyway, we shall see. We'll see on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Good.
I'm looking forward to seeing good teams. I think the gap is thankfully closing a little bit. Look at Japan against South Africa last time.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And you need to be careful about Japan, because if they get you on the right day and the right weather, they can be devastating. So there we go. I'm just looking forward to it. I think it's great.
Good. John, I'll let you close it out. Oh, look, yeah, I suppose there any matches that you're specifically looking forward to that you're attending at all?
I get, fortunately, because I happen to be a trustee of the RFU, I get invited to all the Six Nations matches, not the away trips, not the tour matches. So I enjoy every year going to wherever it happens to be. We normally play England and France either home or away, and the other 3 are at home or away. That makes sense. I quite enjoy going to France. The English, for all the stick they take, are wonderful hosts and very magnanimous losers. They've had lots of practice, but in all honesty, they're good people. And I've been there when we've won the Triple Crown or Grand Slam, and the first person to shake your hand is the English committee man. He's a decent person. They're good people, good rugby people. And I think they're sadly maligned sometimes by their press and that sort of thing. But I enjoy all of the matches. I enjoy matches at interprovincial level. I'm looking forward to the new season. Ulster have got some tightening up in the forwards. They've got Henderson back, thank God. And they have the South African prop forward, who's a good player.
Very good player.
He's a good signing. And I think we've a good chance. It's great. The rugby that you watch on a Friday night at Ravenhill or Aviva or Kingspan is just fantastic. It's great crack.
Well, that ended abruptly. Yes, indeed. Would you any reason for that, Sean?
Well, look, we've all got things to do, and Northern Irishman, it was great for Mr. Hilditch to give his time, but quite frankly, we didn't cut it off. He's probably still sitting there for 12 hours talking into an empty computer screen.
And nothing to do with Sean not paying the Zoom bill. Anyway, it was, and for many of you, this has been in our series, but that was the first one. So we thought about editing, but we decided, in the middle of this series, it'd be quite funny.
Just leave it.
Just leave it as it was. So that was good. I mean, he has got so many stories. I think the big one was just his impression of '87. I mean, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so being the first one in a amateur era for rugby, and it was interesting, maybe not necessarily to the viewer, but it was certainly apparent to the organisers and the participants that how somewhat not structured or unstructured.
Clunky. I think clunky is a good word.
And it was interesting how it was still an international showpiece, but in a non-professional amateur era, and we got everyone there on in their goodwill. And,
that's true.
And that's pretty much how it all came through.
Yeah, there was some good story. I mean, I was quite interested just even by the second one. There's still teething problems, still that sort of where are they going next in terms of these refs, certainly from Dad's point of view. But no, there's really good insight. He does. He likes the stories. And thank you for indulging you listening to my old man.
That was great.
That was a really good one. So look forward to the next instalment. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you very much. Presented by Platypus Brewing.
Thanks.